Hi guys, welcome. This is first series of AI Think Tank. And what we're going to do today is we have a panel discussion of very interesting people. And we're going to basically put our heads together and see if we can come up with some ideas about AI technology, uh, a scientific, futuristic, and philosophical discussion. We're going to focus on the rise of automation. So I'm going to introduce myself and then everybody can introduce themselves. My name is Karthik Swamy. I'm a data scientist and also, electrical engineer. And I like to do AI research as well on the side. Jason?
Hi, I'm Jason Miller. I am a career data scientist currently serving as a technology director and am a small business owner.
Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Bauer. I'm a philosopher at Texas State University, and my philosophical specialties are the history of philosophy and philosophy of mind.
That should be great. Joe?
Yeah, my name is Joseph Megyeri. I'm a transit specialist for a former transit specialist for a metropolitan transit district, and also an owner of a bus company for almost 15 years, actually.
So I think what makes this panel great is we have a collection of people from all backgrounds. Philosophy, we got our data science, we got, transportation, which uses, automation. So, okay. So in this slide, I just want to first go over just some background information really quick. So here are here's an overview of the foundational ideas, right? So everybody's talking about, oh, we need a generalized AI solution, but we kind of don't know what it is. So we're nowhere near a generalized AI solution because we can't really clearly identify what that is. AI is currently rising in separate realms of hardware and software, right? So anything that's hardware related, we tend to put it in this field called mechatronics. Now, mechatronics is basically electrical engineering and mechanical engineering put together. So, basically robots, right? So these are the kind of things where we have like factory robots, but these are robots that don't look like robots. You've seen these automation tools that maybe like that can, go to a field and pick, all kinds of stuff. They can do harvest, they can plow the land, and, they can get rid of bugs and things like that. And then we have bipedal robots similar to like Boston Dynamics. These things, these Terminator looking things that can actually walk, they're developing that. And on the software side, we have, generative AI, we have ChatGPT, we have large language models, which are currently being oversold as AI, at least I think. And then we have, algorithms, machine learning, deep learning. So you sort of have the software end, which is sort of like the brain, and then you have the hardware, which is kind of the robot. What might be the ultimate goal is like a Terminator type, sci-fi type bipedal robot that can, walk and talk. And, the key question there, I mean, to just ponder to yourself would be like, why would anybody want to build something like that? And I think we'll be touching on one of those ideas here pretty soon. So key commonality in both realms is that automation. So automation is such that I have this joke where if you keep automating your job, you'll automate yourself out of the job, So, you're being asked to automate software stuff. And then, of course, like we talked about with the robots in the fields, they're automating stuff, they're taking away both, blue collar work and then software agents and algorithms take away, both blue collar and white collar work, right? So this sort of puts like maybe, somebody who's sitting there doing, going through a bunch of files, doing secretary work or doing, some kind of, planning or, maybe taking information and putting it all together. All these jobs, AI could potentially take over. So we're going to talk about basically the impact of automation here. Okay. So with that, I will go to the next. The way this is going to be is that we have a set of questions and then we'll see how far we can get with each one. And then we'll just sort of go around and then see how far we can get. And I think I will start off the response and then we can just go forward. Okay. So in this question, I mean, this is really, I really wrote this question for Matt. So, because, what is man's motivation for AI? The question here is that why would man be interested in building AI? Why would he try to emulate his intelligence and put it in a machine, right? Does he not realize the dangers? Like, what would be the motivation? And or are we just not thinking that, that far ahead? So in this question, I would say that, we've all heard the expression curiosity killed the cat, right? So when we don't know what it is we're building or what the capabilities are, right? We're kind of in that curious state where we just want to sort of see what can be done. And, we're not really thinking ahead. We're not thinking about the consequence, like, oh, wait, there's a statistic that AI will wipe out 40% of the jobs, right? It's just a speculation. We don't know if that's going to be true, maybe in the next 15, 20 years, but that's the thing, to where it's like we may not be thinking about the future because we're more profit oriented. You know what I mean? We're more about, okay, well, let's automate it so we can make more profit. So this question, I think, is pretty open-ended. I would say, to sum it up, probably because he's just curious and he doesn't know dangerous and he just hasn't thought about it yet. And then maybe it's also monetarily motivated. So then with that, I'm just going to open it up to everybody else. Jason, what do you think?
But for me, I thought that we were going to let Dr. Bauer kick it off, but
Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
okay. So
Matt, you want to?
yeah, Matt.
Matt, if you want to have the final word on everything, that's perfectly fine with us.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Let me take a stab at it. So insofar as the question is asking about people's actual motivations, I'm not sure I can speak to that. But if I can speculate to like what would be useful, valuable motivations, like I can think of maybe two broad motivations for developing AI in the ways that you've been describing. One being kind of a more philosophical one, like it's a matter of self-understanding. Like if you look at some of the pioneers who developed some of the like basic theoretical tools like Turing and people like that, they were very much interested in building models of the mind. And if just a little interesting factoid, but like our term computer, which now we tend to think of as referring to an external piece of hardware, a piece of equipment, a thing, was once, even not that terribly long ago, used to refer to a person, the person who does the computations. So one motivation is we want to understand ourselves, and we think we can understand ourselves through building models and likenesses. And once we get one to work and do the things that we do, then perhaps we'll have some insight into who we are. And the other thing that I would mention as a motivation is I think that AI development is a part of the scientific enterprise more generally. And it seems to me that what drives that is an interest in controlling nature, making it more manageable, making it more predictable, hospitable to us, serving our interests. And we can see, especially with the explosion of, at least what I'm most familiar with, the software side of things with AI, hugely beneficial. It's like think about people's use of ChatGPT. All kinds of people in all kinds of circumstances are now using this. So I'll leave it with that.
Okay. Jason?
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. And also, I guess I would say that from a practical perspective, there's lots of reasons that a company who could do that would want to do it. You would expect to get a lot of attention from the media. You would have a very valuable automation tool that you could sell, even if it were only for entertainment, although we've seen it can be quite a bit more than that. That could be very lucrative. So then if on the organizational level, some companies have an incentive to produce this kind of hardware and software, and technology has gotten to the point where we're capable of producing that kind of hardware and software, then it almost seems inevitable. Somebody's going to do it. Maybe companies A through M can be convinced that there's too much danger, and maybe even governments A, B, and C, but as long as government D allows company Z to go ahead and produce it, it's going to exist, and then it becomes strategic for this to be something that you produce in your home country and in your own company, or that you at least take advantage of when it exists. So I feel on some levels it's kind of unavoidable, and there could be a number of practical motivations aside from the everyday use cases that we're already enjoying with things like ChatGPT. But I believe also that there could be a motivation for a much smaller percent of the population, people like myself, who look at it as kind of a form of um, evolution, or kind of something analogous to having children, to create something that could be eventually greater than yourself, that could endure longer than you, or perhaps several generations of human beings could survive. So you're creating something that goes into the future that is a reflection of you, that takes your work and your intelligence and your memories and your thoughts that you put into it, in its training data or in how you design it, and it's a part of you that's going forward. And
Right. I think, yeah. Joe,
Yeah, looking at it pragmatically, I think the interest and being focused on transportation, I think the interest is a lot to do with making things maybe safer, making things a little more clear, as in the advancements we've currently had in self-driving vehicles and in airplane technology. A lot of that has to do, and I think will more and more rely on AI technology in the future. So it comes down to, can we introduce this technology, whether both mechanical and or software related, that can actually improve safety on our highways and in the air and so on. And I think the proof is already out there, because the latest technology shows that that's the direction we're going. And AI is going to be a great addition to that technology that we use in transportation. And I think a lot of it has to do with that. And there's a great motivation to make things better, more efficient, and AI will play a major role in that. So I see a big advancement in transportation using AI in the future.
okay, great, Joe. Next question is actually about that part, about the dangers. So one thing I forgot to mention is that all the artwork in the slides are created by generative AI. So there you go. So all of this, it's able to create this just by saying, a few prompts, right? So
Yeah.
this is the other thing, is that will this put, people out of work? So this is exactly what I mean. And some of this artwork is pretty fantastic, right? I mean, and of course, where are they getting the training data? That's the other question. But anyway, I think this is great. We had all great answers. So next question. All right. So this kind of goes with what Joe was talking about here for a second. So risks of current AI technology not addressed, right? So we have that safety, issue, but then it's not working all the time, right? So how do we parse this out? So my question here is, why aren't the current risks of AI software and hardware not taken seriously, right? Some people have died in driverless cars. Now, it's a small portion, right? I mean, accidents, are going to happen, even if you just get in a car without AI. But yet this technology is allowed to go on, right? Businesses want to adopt large language models, LLMs, when we clearly know it can hallucinate and provide wrong information. Could this just be a case of shiny object syndrome? So shiny object syndrome is a thing to where in business, we say that it's kind of like a new toy, right? Is that, managers especially fall for this shiny object syndrome, is that they get all excited because it's like, oh, wait, this new toy is really exciting, right? This new thing is really exciting. Let's go with it. And that kind of limits their perception of the dangers of it, or, they're not willing to look at all the sides, of it. So my question here is that, how do we move forward knowing that there's limitations, right? Why aren't they being addressed, or, should we be more careful moving along? So I will start. Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, this is a really tough question. Where it seems in any significant enterprise, like we are going to take on risks, and the question has to be like, how much risk are we willing to tolerate? How much damage along the way? And it does seem to me like some sort of constraints do have to be in play, because perhaps I'm a bit cynical here, but it seems to me As long as somebody can make a buck off of pushing the limits, even if other people come in harm's way, that's what's going to happen. I think I do lean in the direction. I don't have concrete suggestions for exactly how it ought to get regulated. But like insofar as significant harms can be predicted, there should be something to curb the profit incentive to just push through. But that said, the example of the driverless cars, in my mind, that's one that I am somewhat less, that doesn't raise alarm bells for me. That sounds like the sort of thing that could be like what you would expect with any mass use technology like this. Like a trial period, things that can get worked through. I see no reason why optimization couldn't weed these sorts of things out.
Right. Jason?
Yeah. So I guess I find myself in the unsurprising position of being the relative pro-AI extremist. So maybe you should think of me as the AI's lawyer or something. But I actually think that folks have done a really good job of thinking out the possible problems with AI. Maybe not complete. I'm sure there are things we're missing. But if you think about, for instance, Nick Bostrom and his book from about a decade ago called Superintelligence, did a really good job of exploring existential threat and the vulnerable world hypothesis for how technologies such as AI could potentially lead to an extinction level event, to use a term from old movies about asteroids hitting the Earth. And thinking through what are the precautions that we could take, what are the ways that even if we silo the world's smartest AI, it might grow beyond our control. Will it try to hack us before we're ready, even if we keep it physically isolated on its own network? Do we need other AI that we keep a step ahead of it, which have greater levels of control, less freedom, and those are in charge of keeping the eye on the one that we give more freedom to? They've had time to come up with strategies like that, and you do see a lot of key corporate players like Sam Altman even petitioning the government for greater regulation. And there's, for instance, at my former employer, DataRobot, there's even participation with the government on various congressional AI safety initiatives. So I think that there's something to be said positive about those sorts of efforts. Yes, there's some possibility that there's something that we're not thinking of, or perhaps we thought of it, but we think we're taking enough precaution to keep the AI from becoming sentient and having its own agenda and sort of taking over the technology that is essential to our lives and our security. But I don't think that slowing or stopping the progression of technology is a realistic or desirable solution, but rather thinking about how to manage it, and also thinking about things not only of how to keep ourselves safe from the AI, but try to think of the other perspective as well. If we are coming close to perhaps arguably creating a true intelligence, or what Dr. Bauer might consider a separate understanding or mind in that philosophy of mind framework that I know very little about, then perhaps we should ask the question, are we violating the rights of the AI? Can we keep it safe from nefarious human actors who want to sort of essentially enslave it? So I would ask those questions as well, but that's my crazy pro-AI answer.
Yeah, Jason, you just opened up a whole Pandora's box, because what if AI can be hacked, right? Then it's a security issue, right? What if malicious countries hack it? But anyway, that's a whole different thing. Joe?
Yes, well, I do agree with Jason and Matthew in this regard, that there is an inherent risk with some of this technology, and we do need to proceed cautiously as we go along. As you have said earlier, people have died in driverless cars, and of course, some of that could be their own fault for not paying attention, because the technology is not quite up to speed to have it be flawless at this point. look at the situation where they have tried to introduce technology in the airline industry. Boeing had a couple of airline crashes after they introduced some technology that the pilot could not override, and that caused major accidents. So many people have risked their lives and are currently risking their lives in some of this technology if it's not properly introduced to society. And so there is an inherent risk at this time, but I think AI can move us forward and make it better technology and test the technology that we're trying to introduce into society with this automation in transportation, for example. And I think it'll just get better and better. I have no doubts that AI will play a major role in making airline flight virtually perfect, where you don't have accidents at all, maybe, or very rare due to some strange circumstance, and car accidents may come down. So I think in the long run, in transportation, I think it'll play a major role and provide us with safer technology down the line.
Okay, great. I actually forgot to provide my response before I called up Matt, so that I realized it. So I think my response here would be that I think Joe brings up a great point, is that the maybe there's needs to be that trial period, like we're all saying, right, for technology to go, to actually increase, is that there's that initial period where that it is going to be rough. But I think with, if you look at the slide, like I said, all this has been generated by generative AI, just by a few words, and that is the ultimate scenario that we're talking about, where it's like, a rogue AI agent, which is a complete kind of Terminator type thing that's gone rogue, and, it's basically, attacking. So could this be possible? Like Jason said, what if it can be hacked, right? That's one possibility. The other possibility, in programming, is that a lot of times you can't cover all the cases, right? You write a program, and then you hope that the program runs according to what you said, but sometimes there's nuances there, especially with like AI, with like deep learning and this kind of thing, to where it's like there might be a special case where you don't know, it hasn't been tested, right? So it could potentially go wrong. So I can see how, like, you could have if you have a large language model or something like that, where it could make a potential bad decision, but only if we give it autonomous authority, right? So for example, who would give AI the nuclear code to the United States, right? Like, you wouldn't do that. You would basically try to keep it to help mankind for as much as you can, but something where man has to step in, right? Something that crucial, right? You may not want to, so that level of discretion has to be there, to where it's like, what if something goes wrong, and the cost of that, right, is not worth it. And then I would say the driverless cars, like you guys are saying, it could be user error. It could be it could be error. If it's like 1 in a million, right? That is bound to happen if you just step outside and then drive, right? So I do agree that maybe that the whole technology shouldn't be halted, because there's some, and we should proceed carefully. My biggest concern is with the large language models, with like ChatGPT, LLMs, right? So most of the time they're correct, but what they do is they hallucinate. When they hallucinate, what it means is that when it doesn't know what the answer is, right, it just kind of spews nonsense. So, for example, what large language models can do is that if you give it a whole document, like let's say, like, people get lazy. We're going to get to that in a bit, and then there's like a 100-page document. You feed it to this large language model and you say, well, tell me what it's about. And then 90% of it is accurate, but then 10% of it inferred it wrong, right? Then, that is a huge thing, right? If you make a business decision out of that. So I think we're further along with the robots that are kind of mindless, that can just kind of go pick fruit, or can mow the lawn, or speaking plant seeds, that kind of stuff. That's actually mature technology to the point where factories are using but software wise, can it think like a human? I think we got a long way to go, especially with large language models. The only thing that bothers me is that it's being oversold and hyped as like, oh wait, you have to use large language models now, or else you're you're losing the benefit. So I would be careful with that, you know. And I think that is a case of shiny object syndrome, where managers are like, large language models, let's bring them in, let's use them, and then it's we're going to have another discussion on that separately. But my thing is that just getting the data into your large language model, you're going to be stuck right there, so because the data engineering effort would be so huge. But that is for another topic discussion. So I will move on to the next question. That's excellent replies, everybody. So this question here is that discusses the future socioeconomic impacts of AI, 2020s to 2030s, right? We're in 2024. So this technology will ramp up, probably, starting now to the next 15 years. So what might be the socioeconomic impact of functional AI? What would that be? If AI and automation is functional enough to take people's jobs, right? How will this affect the economy when both blue collar and white collar jobs are lost? So the thing here is that, like I said, there was a statistic being thrown around that said 40% of the jobs will be wiped out by AI, especially stuff like, and I can give you some examples. Wouldn't this push the economy into a recession, is my question, right? Because, for example, I think there's actually an Amazon store correct me if I'm wrong, in Portland or Seattle, where there's nobody there. You can just walk in and then just pick what you need and then walk out. And it's, you're based on good faith. But when you take it out, AI, using, computer vision determines that, oh, wait, this soda costs $2 or whatever. They already have your credit card. You just walk in and walk out. There's nobody there. So that's actually been around for a few years. I don't know if it's still around. That's one thing. The other thing is like, we have a lot of other, type of like blue collar jobs that have been automated. Like maybe like McDonald's, I heard that it was testing to where there's like nobody there. You just walk in, and so if all of a sudden 20% of the people got replaced by AI, right? Wouldn't that crash wouldn't that put the economy into a recession? That's my question here. So my response here would be like, we should be careful moving forward, because if we just say, okay, 20% of it is going to get replaced, that is going to have an impact. What's going to happen to all those people, right? Are they going to find, do we have a suitable place for them to find a new job? Or that will sort of cause a ripple effect where it's, if people lose jobs, they become homeless increases, all kinds of other kind of things that we should be careful before we put it. So I think that really my whole thing is that the recession, right? There could be a recession. We should be careful moving along. So that's actually just all I have to say. So I'm going to open it up to Matt.
Yeah, I love this question. For me, so since I don't feel like I'm in a position where I can make a prediction here, but what I can do, I think, is raise some interesting questions of, on the one hand, supposing that a huge portion of the labor force is put out of work by AI, what does this mean for society, apart from simply the economic response? But suppose we do go into a recession or something very deep like that. What responses should we be open to? How can we respond to this? We're in a society where for a person to get by, they have to earn an income, they have to have an employer, they have to make a wage. If many of us, if a huge contingent of the population has been made superfluous, there is no work that we need to be doing, then I think one of the questions that this raises is, well, do we need to rethink how we've organized our society? Must there be now a way for these superfluous people to carry on, not tied to wage earning? And I know this is not an original suggestion at all. In some cases, I can't name names here, but people have suggested this will be the thing that pushes us in the direction of accepting a universal basic income or something like that. And as well, I think it raises kind of existential questions, not just of how society should respond, but like, should we welcome or should we fear the being replaced by AI? Supposing that my economic my ability to carry on and take care of supposing that's not at stake. Let's say that I'll have some way to survive, even if I don't have the job, whether it's through universal basic income or something else. Should I welcome that? What will my life be in that case? I think for many of us, our identities, who we are, our purpose for going on in life is our career, is our way of making a living. So suppose that now I'm not tied to earning a wage. What is the point of my existence? What do I do with myself now? And I'll put myself in the optimistic camp. Like, I think it would be fantastic. You know, I think many of our jobs aren't worth the time that we have to spend on them. And if we could be freed from that, we should pursue it.
Jason?
Sure. Okay, so this is probably my favorite of the questions so far. And Karthik, as you know, before I was a data scientist, I came from an economics background. I'm not really an economist, but I did study economics in school. And this is really kind of a cool question to me. So it gets at the economics of the labor market and how does deadweight loss work? How does economic growth and expansion work? And to kind of cut it short and get to the point, I would say that I would view that AI as much more of a catalyst for economic growth, and just based on the dynamics of the decision to rely on AI over a human employee in a given situation, the amount of benefit that's created by having that AI take over the human being's job and perform in a very efficient manner is greater than the amount of money that it costs to employ the human being. So you get the savings from them, which perfectly displaces the in terms of the overall economy, it displaces the effect of that person losing their job, because that's just, let's say the person's making $100,000. It's the same $100,000 whether we're giving it to that person or whether the company is saving it. And then you also have the additional benefit of increased productivity from the automation. It's the same discussion that people had when electricity was harnessed. The same questions we had when automation became better for factory lines, and we started moving from things like traditional assembly line to small batch, right? And so we keep increasing efficiency, and therefore the overall size of the economy grows, it doesn't shrink. But there is one really, really good point here, which is that people will lose their jobs. Yes, the robot will absolutely take your job. It will create jobs, more jobs, better paid jobs in other sectors doing preferable work. But the people who lost their job may not be trained for that work. So that's the structural unemployment in economic language. So there will be structural unemployment as a result of that. And as a result, I would look at this as more of an argument for, although Matt mentioned a universal basic income, which I think has merit for other reasons. I would look at this particular topic as more of a motivation to have compensation for retraining for people who've been displaced by structural unemployment. So in other words, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're out there working hard for Amazon in a warehouse, and you know you haven't done anything wrong, but you lose your job now. And you and your family don't really deserve to suffer. It's not your fault that Amazon came out with a better robot. So let us give you a little bit of training, help you get a certificate to go work in a field where you're working with the AI. Maybe instead of being the person who hauls around the boxes, now you're the person who services the machine, or you analyze data from the machine and supervise the various automated processes in the warehouse. So that would be more my perspective. That it's overall a good thing, but it does necessitate some economic safety. And the one and last thing I'll call out that Matt was reminding me of when he mentioned people having asked the question of, well, okay, if I'm not doing this career, then what do I want to do with my life? That actually gets to a Star Trek answer. So Star Trek was kind of seminal in being a fictional environment for people to explore ideas of how things like this might go when we started seeing it on the horizons many decades ago. And the idea, at least in their Star Trek universe, is that people work because it's intellectually stimulating. People can go do research or go, on an adventure, go be a starship captain because it's fulfilling, self-actualizing activity. So I would hope that people get to work in more rewarding careers, doing more self-actualizing work as a result of AI.
Great. Joe?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up where Jason left off, in that I think in the future we will see more high-tech jobs. And I think AI is coming at a perfect time, in my opinion, because as we transition to this kind of an AI world, and jobs are lost in the blue collar, white collar arena, I think it's coming at a good time, and at an almost perfect time, because many of us who grew up in the past, so-called baby boomers, are now transitioning into retirement, and the whole new generation behind us are all very computer savvy. They start computers at a very young age. Technical stuff is no obstacle for them. And so as the world develops into more technology, and all these jobs, blue collar, whatever, are lost, I think they'll be gained in people running these projects and this equipment and this technology. Somebody's got to watch it. It's got to focus on it, make sure it's working right. And that's a job in itself that may not have really blossomed yet. And so with the younger generation coming on board, they'll be asked to monitor this stuff, keep it under wraps, keep it under control, so it doesn't get out of control, where you have robots running around killing people because people are useless, or whatever the AI becomes, like a monster kind of idea, what people are afraid of. I think we are transitioning at just the right time. There's a whole new generation. They're going to be writing AI. They're going to be monitoring AI. They're going to be using AI, and it's going to make our lives simpler and better in the long run. I know that's more pragmatic. That's
Joe, you have great response. Everybody had a great response. I just want to add one more thing. Joe brings up a great point in that I like to make this joke, Joe, if I may, is that you need all these people to basically take care of robots. My joke here is that will your job be replaced by a robot, and you'll be asked to clean the robot and maintain the robot? Do you see the joke in that? To where the robot becomes the master, and you're sitting there tinkering it, putting oil in it, making sure the mechanical parts work, and it's like, okay, go do your job. And he's basically taking your job, and your job is to make sure the robot is, that, to me, that is the funniest thing, right? Man, it gets replaced, and now the robot is the master. You're saying there's a whole slew of jobs in basically robot, factory work, or you're sitting there preparing the robot, maintaining the robot, much like you maintain a car, doing the maintenance. And that's what humans do. Humans basically, there's a whole factory of humans doing that. That would be my joke. And then my other thing, just to cap this question off, it would be the ethical concern, is that, kind of like what Matt, kind of brought up, would be that, what would the ethical concern be? Did we just something to just think about, right? Is, should we put man out of work? Then what is he going to do? Then we'd have to provide a universal stipend, and then do we have funds for that? So it's that sort of thing where, maybe it's not always about corporate interests. And, of course, if you leave it up to corporate, they're going to replace everybody with a robot, because robots don't call in sick, right? They don't need to take vacation. Of course, they're going to be more productive, right? Anything that's automated is going to be much more productive. So there's that ethical line where it's like, okay, what do you do with the human now? So that's what I would just add. This is a very complex topic. I know we're running short in time, so let's go to the, and if people need to drop off, that's fine. I think we had two more questions. Okay. So are robots taking our jobs inevitable? We kind of talked about this already. Can robots be useful? Does it make sense to use robots for jobs we don't want to do? This is touching on that utopian thing where it's like, maybe or will this put those people out of work and contribute to the loss of blue collar jobs? So what I was thinking here is that robots have a very useful kind of function in that, let's say like firefighters, right? Why send a human to go fight a fire if you can send robots to do that, bipedal robots that can just go in there, right? A lot of people die as firefighters. So that's one task that maybe humans don't want to, maybe you don't want to give your life and then die in a fire, right? Second thing would be like, I hate to say it, but that Terminator kind of robot patrol. How many cops die, right? If we could get to a Terminator type situation, send the robot out to patrol, right? I hear and play, Jason, you can, comment on this if you know. when you respond is that I heard like in Japan, they're ahead of us in some. They have robots that patrol the streets, like small little, like Star Wars kind of, R2D2 type of things that kind of patrol the street. And if you're loitering, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that's what I heard. So could that would be a useful thing for robot is to do, why should we send a cop to die when a robot can go do that battle, much like a Terminator, sort of thing. Third thing I can think of is space exploration. Now, I love Star Trek. I think everybody does here in this panel. But it's very fictitious to the point where if you send a man in space, the biggest problem here is the radiation. So radiation causes cancer, right? So if we actually do interstellar travel, the problem is that will we be shielded by enough, whatever the shielding may be. So, and of course, the time limit to go to like Alpha Centauri or something like that, would be too long for us. So would it make sense to send robots in space so they don't have to die? Because it's like, we have a risk of, things like, radiation damage that once you leave this atmosphere, right, there is no protection. And then this atmosphere protects us because the cosmic rays that come through, they're filtered through the atmosphere. When it hits the ground, it's very little. Now, you have cosmic ray particles going through you right now that could cause a mutation, but most likely it won't. The higher up you go, right, the more damage, that it can do because there's more particles, there's nothing to filter. So these type of things, these three things, I think robots can be useful. So I think so that's the utopian sense is that these hard jobs that we don't want to give our lives to, maybe robots will be useful. That's my thing, Matt.
I like this one. My first gut reaction is to say that on the whole, it seems like it would be a good thing to have robots taking over for many jobs that people might not necessarily find rewarding. I think maybe for me anyway, the really tough question is, are there types of work that we would want secure? From being taken over by a robot. This is pretty challenging, like something that we ought to do. I mean, I suppose you can imagine a person who you were mentioning earlier, the stores where you walk in and out and you don't see a single person. I suppose there are some people who might say, well, like, this is a loss to society, that interaction while being out in public is with other flesh and blood human beings is like important for us. I would not be shocked if what we found was that just as there's been research showing that like it's psychologically beneficial to be exposed to nature and we're worse off in modernity the more cut off we are from nature, I don't doubt that you would find very similar results when it comes to interaction with human beings. And that there is a kind of real threat here in that the more convenient it is to avoid contact with others and a lot of the anxieties and things that come up with that, the more people will be prone to doing that. So perhaps there's a danger of like desocializing us that if you imagine like the relatively extreme scenario where all sorts of retail type services have been handed over to robots. A possible danger of not having enough contact with other people and psychologically, existentially suffering for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, it could send the human into a depression, right? That's a great point, right? If you do want to walk into a store and not see a single human being at all, and then just go in and so that could send you into a depression, I suppose. That's a great question, Jason.
Yeah, well, yeah, these are really interesting points. So a couple of quick comments. You mentioned the security guard robots in Japan. Yeah, that is totally real. In fact, actually, they're already over the United States too. It's just that they're very expensive. So one, for instance, is called Nightscope. It's a relatively nice looking model that's pretty tall. And they have videos of it out in the desert, things like that, trolling around. But more practical models are much smaller, and the use of AI is primarily more like with a Roomba vacuum to move it around the perimeter, and it has its computer vision and its cameras and a blue police style light and things like that to scare people off. So there certainly is already AI and robotic replacement of jobs going on. And I'll make the point again that this is nothing new. The technology and automation have been increasing for ages, far, far before we and even our grandparents were born. That was already happening. And I think that the only danger really here is that it might happen in an unexpected rate and cause a spike up in that structural unemployment. You mentioned the Amazon store. Yes, that is real. There's a funny twist to that story, Karthik. So they shut down most of them. And the reason is that they lost a lot of goodwill with the public or publicity when they found out that the computer vision wasn't working well enough. So they were paying people sub minimum wage rates to watch the cameras. Yeah, so that was funny. But no, I definitely think that robots will take people's jobs. I don't have a problem with it as long as we're not unfairly penalizing the people who are being replaced, saying, you know, we don't, you know, this is not our problem. You figure it out for yourself. Well, you know, I just invested all that money in training or all this time. So we should help people out to connect them with suitable work if they're going to work. And if they run out of work to do, and we just have to be a society that spends more time writing songs and reading literature, I don't think that would be the end of the world. I see your point regarding the socialization. And, you know, certainly we experience a lot of that with COVID-19, right? Hopefully we learn how to do things by video a bit more, but people are still free to go meet in person with other living human beings. Just maybe this frees up the people who had to do the boring, monotonous work. It's okay with me if the teenager gets to spend more time in school or studying rather than working as my checkout clerk. That's my opinion.
Yeah, you know, I want to just touch on one thing Jason said, which is we need to mention that is that now they do have functional robots, but they're super expensive right now, right? It could be whatever it is, $500,000, a couple $1 million. So what will happen is that just as with any technology, when it first comes out, it's going to be super expensive, and it's going to be exponentially increasing to the point where, you know, it'll become cheaper and cheaper, and it'll become more ubiquitous to where maybe one day, you know, you could have a robot servant like the Jetsons, you know, the old cartoon, to where, you know, that could be possible. I think that's where we're going, is that technology is really expensive, and then as we move through time, these robots will become cheaper and cheaper, so that, you know, we can, you know, you can actually maybe your local city will be able to afford it and have night patrol using it, right? So Joe?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to follow up on what Jason has said and Matthew in regards to having robots displace a lot of workers. And it's true, it will happen initially. And but I think this whole robot technology, the kind we're talking about, where you got robots, humanoid robots wandering around doing things, doing jobs. Right now, the robotic industry is more stationary. It's something that does one task, moves around maybe with wheels or something, and or cameras or policemen, like a box floating down, rolling down the streets, monitoring crime or something like that. The humanoid robot is a ways off, I believe. Maybe not in my lifetime, you know, I'm getting older by the minute here, but maybe in the future, we'll have all that, like you say, and that's down the line. I'm sure it's coming. But let's say, for instance, you do have robots in the grocery store monitoring people leaving a robotic system, an AI system, like the stores that failed. They failed because there was some trust in the public that they, you know, they weren't able to monitor what people took out without being paid. But let's say you have a combination of both robots in the form of sensors and software technology monitoring things, and the humans there are not necessarily checking you out, but they're maybe stocking the shelves at first, where you know, robots might not be as good at doing that, or monitoring the aisles for cleanliness or whatever. But I'm sure in the future it'll be more robotic. But I think maybe there's a transition where, just like you have a greeter at Walmart or something like Target, Maybe the store could have greeters, people that are there welcoming you in. Can I help you find something? It's in aisle 7. Oh, I need this. It's over there. And then maybe elderly people can be benefited by having some robotic help, like some kind of automated cart or something, and so on. I think there's going to be a transition period. We're not going to jump from where we are now straight to automated robots functioning and doing everything. That's down the line. It's going to be 20 years maybe. I'm maybe shorter, but it's still going to be down the line as a whole new generation of people come in who will accept robots, who will respect them, will work with them, will understand them. The generation we have now, a lot of retired senior citizens, baby boomers and such, they're going to be, troubled by such robotic creatures. But for space travel, absolutely robots, functional humanoid robots going out, researching space, doing things on other planets, Mars, for example. I see nothing but a future for robots in space, absolutely 100%. We cannot live in space. We cannot tolerate the radiation belts and whatever is out there. It's very difficult until we start building facilities on Mars and the moon or wherever. Robots are the answer to going further out. And they can survive because all they need is power. They don't need to eat or sleep or anything else. So they'll be great for space travel. And I think that's a big place where robots can almost immediately start bringing that kind of technology to the world.
Yeah, Joe, in the beginning of your response, you touched on something which is basically the crux of this whole conversation, which is, we're talking about generalized AI, right? That we're saying that we're nowhere near that. And Joe made this comment that, whatever it is out there, it can only do one thing, right? That's exactly what we're stuck on right now, is that we have this AI, we have this intelligence, but a lot of times it's singular tasked, right? And that is the whole thing that we're trying to do, is say that let's take the singular task. It's really good at one thing because it's learned how to do one thing, right? And that is the biggest challenge we have today, is that, well, how can I make that one thing many things, right? So that's really one of the key challenges. I think Jason would agree that we're having, is that is the definition of functional AI, or universal AI, in the sense that we don't want it to just do one specific task, right? We want it to be able to learn a variety of tasks, and that is a challenge right now. That's kind of where we're sort of bottlenecked, and we kind of don't know the definition. So I think everybody had a really good response. So I'm going to move to the next question. So at this point, I know we're running late here. So Matt, can you stay?
Yeah, I've got
Okay.
a little more time.
Okay, so I think this one will be really suited, for everybody. If you guys want to drop off, that's fine. But here we go with this question. This is the last question. So, a far dystopian future, right? The 22nd century and beyond. So the problem we're having, one of the problems is that due to medicine and due to just remember that, I believe, a couple of thousand years ago, maybe, people only lived to like maybe 40 or 60, you know what I mean? 40 was considered, if you look at old movies, like, the life expectancy was really low. Now the life expectancy is like, 86 years old. So as technology increases, biotechnology increases, so the span of the human being is longer. People are living longer, which is great, right? So what they're saying is the world population right now, 8 billion, it will just keep going and going. And so at some point it'll sort of curb, right? Because what will happen is, if you run these statistical models, people will run out of resources, right? Much like a bacteria population. So if there's not enough resources to feed them, sometimes they'll sort of curb. So it's not going to be a linear growth where we're going to have 10 billion people living on this planet, hopefully, but it'll sort of curb. This is what a lot of models have predicted, or, economists are predicting, is that it'll sort of curb to maybe 8 billion, 8.5 billion, and then people will stop having less kids. But inevitably, we don't know that, but inevitably the population is going to rise. So the question is, compare the rise of world population with the rise of AI and automation. this seems like a dire scenario because you have an increased amount of people, because it's still going up linearly, right? We haven't started curbing, living on Earth, and their jobs will be replaced by AI and automation. So what will this look like in 100 years and beyond? I mean, are we looking at this kind of dystopian future, much like, what I've shown here in the artwork? So that is a question. So my response here would be, it would be brief in the sense that we really don't know. So if we have a model that keeps, linearly increasing, we're going to run into trouble because we have more people, less jobs. That seems like a huge, recession. We're, kind of a societal collapse. But if we start curbing at some point, maybe there's some kind of balance. But the serious threat here is that when do we stop and then say, okay, enough of the robots and automation, not just robots, but software automation as well, taking over jobs, because this is impacting. We have more people and we have we don't have anything for them to do. So touching on everything we've talked about, this is the ethical concern. What do you do with the human? Do you put the human out of the, or is this going to be more jobs maintaining AI, right? Kind of like what we talked about, well, now you need somebody to make sure that the computer vision is doing its job properly. Like you have inspectors, doing the, or, cleaning the robot or things like that. So I'm just going to put this question out. And I think Matt would have the best answer here. So I'm going to hold Matt. I think I'm going to hold you to last point this time, because I think this is really up your alley. So Jason, you want to start with this?
Sure. So of course, from my perspective, these two things do go together, but perhaps in a little bit different way. So in terms of Malthusian predictions and the idea that we increase the population, yeah, no, I totally appreciate those. I'm from the state of Georgia, originally went to University of Georgia. We have the Georgia Guidestones, which are basically Georgia's monument to Malthusian predictions. So in my view, the most effective contraceptive that we could get people to use is money, because we know that wealth and income and fecundity and fertility are inversely related. So the more wealthy you are, the more education you have, the less children you have. So one reason to lean more into AI and automation is that we need to keep growing the size of our economy, and having more AI, more automation means a greater productivity, and doesn't even just create jobs in AI, although it certainly does that, but just having that additional productivity in unrelated industries, let's say in arts and entertainment, like making Hollywood movies. Well, we drive down the cost a lot with all the emerging technologies. You can make the movies better. More people can make movies. Now you've got services like Netflix and Paramount and HBO Max making the really niche series for people with particular interest. So you can find some that really align well with your particular subgenre of interest. And I think that's a good thing. So I would look at this as a way of propelling economic growth and helping us to cope with having more and more people, get people to reduce their fertility, or rather their fecundity. And also in terms of space exploration, yeah, I think that using AI and robots to propel that is the long-term solution, because eventually, even if we slow the rate of growth, as long as we're still above the replacement rate, we're going to run out of space and resources for all the human beings on Earth. So we got to expand other planets.
Yeah, that's the resources is the big thing. It's like, if you look at bacteria models, right? Bacteria will keep dividing and increasing, right? In an exponential, way. But if you take away the resources, then it will start to curb, right? So that's the thing, is that is, I think resources is the big thing. If we have more people driving, I mean, what do we do? Less, more people. So maybe AI will be used to harvest more food. That right? I mean, that is the thing, where bigger population, we need more food, right? Maybe so I think that is a definite concern here, Joe.
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point. I think all this technology, AI and whatever, is going to help in farming, for example. We're already using high technology and GPS things, which we wouldn't have, half a century ago. It's all being used for farming. Tractors are running themselves. up and down the field doing harvesting and such. And so this AI technology, as we introduce it to all the various fields, blue collar, white collar fields, it's going to offer people, like you say, more time, more leisure, and they can better utilize their time instead of working from night to day, sweating, trying to make the harvest as we did in the past. The robotic tractors are out there farming, doing their job, getting the thing done, and the farmer, the rancher, is busy managing the ranch. So you don't need 100 guys working, you just need a handful of people operating the system. I think it's going to benefit us in the long run. And I do see a world where AI is being introduced. Entertainment examples, automated things for firefighters or police, robotic cars, airlines. It's all going to play a role in our future, and I think it's going to be welcomed as time goes on. Plus, you've got to realize, I think, that as populations grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and we need more and more supplies and food and whatever, we're going to find that as people become educated, they have less children. As in the past, people needed a lot of children to take over the things around the house, farming, whatever. Now we need less children. What is it down to in the modern society? It's 1.2 children or whatever the equation is. So as people become more educated, there's less children to take over, and populations are diminishing. I hear that the Chinese population is diminishing, even though we thought at one time they'll explode, take over the world. It looks like now in the next 50 to 100 years, China's going to be looking for immigrants more and more to take over the infrastructure. So let's face it, times will change. We'll accept AI, and this robotic world we talk about, automated world, AI technology, both software and hardware, will definitely help mankind.
Great response. So Matt, I will give you the final word. So on this, and then we'll wrap this up.
Thanks. Well, good. I'll balance things out now and get a little more utopian in my opinion here, and somewhat correct some of my earlier responses in that I think, for instance, when I was talking about the rise of AI being able to take various jobs that we have, in principle, I'm optimistic. Were we to, like Jason had suggested, were we to provide assistance to displaced workers to reskill them for new jobs, were there actually new jobs available for them to take? Were we to arrange for something like universal basic income in the event that that's not a possibility, then we should welcome it. Do I think that's likely? I don't think that's the direction that we're likely to head. Just because I think for so many of the people who are in places to make these decisions, it's not in their interest in particular. And I think too, coming back to this particular questions and the specifics of it having to do with population growth, it's true, and Jason is right to bring this up, that there's some reason for optimism here, and that with the rise in education, people tend to have less children, and so that can be a cause of population tapering off. And like we are on a trajectory of, however impressed we are with it or not, we're on a trajectory of more or less continuous economic growth. However, you have to think about the distribution of it. If it were evenly distributed throughout the population, well, then you would expect the population growth to decline. If it's going into the hands of relatively few people, that's not going to affect the population all that much. And I'm not confident in stating anything factual here, but that's a concern that would be on my mind, that in the world we're living in, wealth will not be distributed in such a way so that the population will have that increase in standard of living that typically correlates with a decrease in having kids. so that yeah, maybe some of the more worrisome scenarios are fairly likely ones.
Okay, so I think that we're at the end of this presentation. I would just like to say, so it looks like our consensus seems to be that we just need to find positive ways to coexist with AI, right? Would you guys agree? Coexist with AI and try to mitigate the risks, as much as possible, because there is a distinct possibility that AI can do things that we don't want to do, or maybe we're not as good as at doing, right? So it can bring a type of efficiency, right? It can bring a type of optimization, if you will. So would you guys agree? The final word is that trying to find better ways to coexist with AI, since we can't fight it, right? Find intelligent ways to integrate it into our society. And I'll just leave it at that. Anybody have any comments on that?
I think we can do it. I hope that we have the ability to socially organize to make it happen.
Yeah.
I'll make one comment, which is that I agree with what you said, but I think that psychology and the AI maturity in terms of AI's maturity of its own and our maturity and how we relate to it is a major factor. So we talked earlier, you mentioned earlier about the idea that, okay, yeah, there's going to be jobs now. The robot has replaced me, but I can clean the robot, but now it's like I'm serving the robot, and that's the master, I'm the slave. I completely understand that perspective, but a lot of it is how you view the situation. If you think of it instead of a peer who you're competing with, or a master-slave scenario, instead of where the parents, this is our brilliant child, we've been teaching it, nurturing it, trying to get it to surpass us, that can radically alter your perspective on how to view the situation and how to move forward. So that's my point.
Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I think AI is coming along at almost the right time for the world. As the world gets more complex and we need more engineering, we need more technical people, and the generation that was all about blue collar, white collar, going to work 8 to 5, driving their cars, going places, going to the office and such, is diminishing. People are working from home. Times are changing. World is getting more technical. And I think it's coming at the right time for the new generation, the younger generation that's just growing up, that will accept this technology and make it work. And they'll have a value. The next generation will have a value in running it, building it, maintaining it, and working with it. So you might say that's the new blue collar, is writing, programming, and such. That's the new world. Okay, so I think in a way it'll be fine. You're right. There's no real economic incentive for companies to put people back in where the robots took over, but or AI technology takes over. But there's something to be said about the human touch or the human nature, that they have to be there to make it all work properly. AI can be your tool, but still you need the hands and the mind. Our minds are, infinite in the possibilities, where AI is only what we make it or how much we train it. So I think there's a place for it in the future, and I think we'll all live with it somehow and make it work.
I hope so too. You guys have been a great panel, guys. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying late.
All right.
Thank you, Karthik.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good talking with you all.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Nice talking with you.
Nice meeting
So-
you. See you guys.